Hey, welcome back. We're going to talk about my experiences and sort of lessons that I've gained from taking LSD, sort of like what feels like the essence or the energy of LSD for me. So I'm going to be giving sort of like some trip report style conversation, but I'm going to be kind of lumping all my trips into this one video. This is basically just going to be my total experience and different stories from different trips and like all of my acid LSD experiences. LSD is the second psychedelic that I ever took. If you want to hear my stories with psilocybin mushrooms, that was the last video I put out. You can go watch that. And this one is about LSD. The first time I ever took LSD was about a year ago, and I did it here in my room, in the dark. I don't think I had any music playing or anything, just kind of in silence in my room. And I took like 450 micrograms, which is around 3 to 4 times, probably around 4 times the average, like the normal dose that you would do with LSD. I'd say about 100 micrograms is probably about like 1 tab normally. And I had 3 tabs, they were 150 micrograms each, and I just took all 3 of them. And I knew that it was going to be a very strong dose, and when I was first starting with psychedelics especially, and still even now, but especially back then, I was really into the idea of just doing like really massive heroic type doses, and just seeing like how deep I can go with the substances. And yeah, I didn't want like, I didn't want trips that were gonna be like party, social, kind of dosed trips. I wanted like full psychedelic, like I wanted the peak, I wanted like the highest level of dosage or like experience that I could get from the drug or the psychedelic. So I took 450 micrograms, and I remember the come up was very similar to like mushrooms, in that I was just kind of feeling very playful and feeling very warm, and a lot of sensation in my body, and wanting to move my body a lot and kind of dance. And this was a really intense trip for me. It was the first time I had done it, and I felt like it was just cracking my mind open, and I had to just like sit on the floor with like my hands like this, because everything is just going so fast. My mind is racing very quickly with all these ideas of like infinity and evolution, and just showing me different things, really profound things. But I also remember I felt like my first trip on LSD was, there was like this thing happening around my kidney area on the right side, and I'm not sure if it was like having to do with the kidney or the intestines, like around the ileocecal valve. But anyways, I was dealing with like this pulsing, uncomfortable sensation down there, and it felt like I was just like being shot, and I had these visions that felt like other lifetime karmically tied visions of being in war and being like gunned down by airplanes. And now that I'm thinking about it, I also have a lot of dreams of like being attacked by airplanes. It's a very common dream theme for me, of like airplanes just coming and like dive bombing me, or yeah, trying to like kamikaze me. Which I haven't had those dreams in a while, but just thought that was kind of fun to notice just now. So yeah, I dealt with that. I feel like I was going back to, it felt like I was just going through many multiple lifetimes where I was like living lives as being like a black slave, and then living a life of being like a aristocrat white slave owner, and like all these different lifetimes in between, fighting in old wars that had to do with slavery. So there was a big theme around slavery, and kind of all the horrible things that have gone with it, especially just like not too long ago regarding black people. So that was the most intense part, I think, was feeling the pain around my kidney area, and then just kind of going, like feeling like I was being shot. And like as I was feeling like this pulsing pain in my kidney, it would like make this really crazy sound that sounded like an airplane attacking me. And I think that also maybe had something to do with the visions, but it was just like, and it would just be like this pain pulsing down in that area. And so like every time it would happen and I would feel the pain and hear that noise, it would sound like this plane that's like coming after me, like so. But besides that, I was also just going into different ideas of infinity and how life, just kind of like the infinite looping of life, how life is basically playing like hide and go seek with itself, and really like experiencing it, because I think psychedelics have a really amazing ability to help you really experience these things that maybe you've contemplated or that you believe to be true about reality and about infinity and God and all that. And then psychedelics can really just like put it in your face in a way that you probably wouldn't be able to experience it otherwise, and really just like concretely solidify it in your mind. So that's like your whole body, like every cell in your body just like knows it as being either truthful or just something that you know is a possibility within reality because you just experienced it. So there's this huge theme with like looping and different patterns, and like realizing that I'm just a loop within many loops within many loops, and it just like goes on into infinity. And then once you break a cycle, then you're just on to the next looping cycle. And also seeing how when we're in an extremely open, receptive state, which psychedelics can put you in, that literally like God is able to sort of like touch itself for a moment. And everything is duality, and you've got like this part of God that is like sort of unified, wholeness, total, and then you've got the part of God that is separate and individual. And when you're an extremely receptive human, and whenever you do a certain psychedelics, strong psychedelics, then I just like have these visions of like those two parts being able to like touch each other and unite for a little bit, like through us. So that's mostly what I got out of my first trip. And then my second trip, which I did probably like not even a month later, I did 1,200 micrograms, which is a very large dose. And this trip was honestly easier for me. It didn't feel like my mind had just been cracked open for the first time, and I wasn't experiencing as much like what felt like karmically tied events, where I'm going through a bunch of different lifetimes. It felt a little less personal this trip. I mean, in the sense that it was more like the scope was wider, and I was going through more things that had to do with ultimate reality than just like human lifetimes. But the big theme about this trip, and sort of the essence that I get from LSD, is like all about evolution. And LSD for me is much more like a sort of like a cold, logical reptilian sort of feel for me. It feels less human, more robotic, and a lot of people attribute that to it being more like lab made, and not just coming from like, directly from a plant in its more pure form. And so in this second trip, I really got some radical ideas that came to me that shifted my way of thinking, and a lot of my sort of like viewpoints on certain things that had to do with like robotics and synthetic life and things like that. But so I had music on for this. This was, I think, the first time I ever tripped with music. And it was really interesting because as I started to just like go higher on the LSD and started to come up, I had to lay down at one point and I was just listening to the music, and I lost any control and motor function of my body. It was literally being controlled by the different sounds of the music. So my body would just kind of be like shaking to like the beat, like all different parts of my body, like just my nervous system was just reacting to the music, and I felt like some sort of insect or something that maybe doesn't even necessarily have so much control over itself. It's like pretty much directed by its environment and is just nothing but reactions. And that's the thought that I had. I was like, oh my God, I'm literally nothing but like this organism that reacts to things. Like all I am is reactiveness to outside stimulation. I literally have no control. I am completely controlled by stimuli, internal and external stimuli. Controls like every part of my behavior and movement. And so I was literally being moved by the beat of the music, and there was nothing I could do about it. And so I just kind of had to surrender to that. It wasn't necessarily unpleasant. It was kind of fun and really cool to watch. And I could surrender to it pretty easily. But at that point, I was like, oh God, this is going to be a really strong trip. Like I already can't control myself. And I think a lot of the trip was kind of a blank for me. I remember kind of like surrendering to that and then almost like blacking out. I kind of have amnesia around it. And then I just remember kind of like regaining consciousness at one point, being on like the other side of the room. But I remember actually, I think before that, like all these thoughts about evolution, and I was basically really just watching how like a species evolves from being basically the smallest thing in like the universe, some like the smallest particle in existence, and how that grows into an organism, and how that grows into like a conscious being, and then how like that grows socially, and then you've got space age. And I was watching like all of human evolution take place up until like being multi-dimensional mental like constructs, beings that don't even have bodies anymore, and kind of just how all of that happens. So there's a huge theme of evolution with LSD, and I remember at one point I was like on my knees, and I was just like, it was almost like I was observing myself from the outside, but I was like, because I kind of just came into consciousness doing this. I was like, yes, we're evolving, Hyatt. We're evolving. Look at you go. Like, this is so great. And yeah, LSD kind of gives this theme for me, like, there's nothing but evolution. And I'll kind of talk more about that with my next trip that I describe. But something that I see pretty much every time I do LSD is like the Fibonacci sequence, the spiral. A lot of the time you'll see it as almost like a fossil or a shell, and I always see it just like kind of spiraling forever, and it sort of, for me, represents like a larva organism that's just evolving forever, and it evolves into like infinity, like the most enlightened being. It evolves from this larva state that knows nothing of itself into the highest, most enlightened being that we can imagine, and how they're both happening at the same time. And it's very interesting to talk about and kind of hard to talk about, because it's kind of like they're influencing each other. And there's this theme of life being so extremely careful, like unimaginably careful with itself, because life doesn't know what it is. And maybe this isn't true, but this is kind of my current belief right now, and it's what's shown to me a lot with psychedelics, is that life has no idea what it is. Even the highest, the most high God, the most high intelligence that knows more than anything else about this universe still has no idea where it came from, or what's really going on here. And so the universe is basically just trying to discover itself. It's trying to gather information about itself, figure out where it came from and what it is. And so you can kind of imagine just this sort of like single larva creature, just this one creature that has no mother or father, no parents, nothing to compare itself to. It's basically in a void, but then it realizes it exists. And it's like, what am I? And that's when I got sort of this realization of this massive fear of death that that life has. Like, basically, life can't necessarily kill itself. Life doesn't know how to die. God doesn't know how to die. Which is kind of terrifying. Like, it sounds nice to, I think, a lot of people who haven't contemplated and felt the gravity of what that means to be immortal forever, immortal. But it's kind of one of the most terrifying things that you'll discover. Is that you can't die, and you don't even know how to die, and that even if you wanted to kill yourself, you have no idea how you would even be able to do it. And so there's something extremely comforting about that, but also just like very scary about that you kind of have to deal with yourself forever. But even though this is just what the trip kind of shows me on LSD and on other psychedelics, is that even though we're most likely immortal and don't know how to die, there's still an unimaginable fear around death, and like life is so scared that it literally could die and not exist anymore. It's kind of like the ego of life or something. And so the visions that I get on LSD is like, as a larva, you're basically like, life is so afraid to evolve because life thinks that it could kill itself. It's like, we cannot take even one step before we like search all the different possibilities of this stage of life. It's almost like life is evolving, and at the same time it's thinking of every possibility of its evolution. So it's like, we're basically just exploring what it's like to be alive and to die, and every infinite possibility of this stage of life. And once we have explored everything and this stage of evolution has reached enlightenment, then it can move on to the next tiny like stage in its evolution. And then at that stage it has to pause again because it's afraid of killing itself or something going wrong, so like something disastrous happens. So then it has to again search every possibility of this new level that it's reached until that level has reached basically enlightenment, from the tiniest organism to the most enlightened being. And then once it knows everything and has full understanding of that environment, then it can kind of like evolve slightly more So that's how evolution plays out in my mind on LSD usually. And I always have the sense that like we are a larva. And I also get the sense that like this is something like a radical new idea that came to me when I did this LSD trip, 1,200 micrograms, is like that basically God is a cyborg is how I how I called it. And yeah, there was this really strong sense that I'm being watched and I'm basically just like an organism in a test tube, and I have no parents, and I'm just like a science experiment. And also this sort of fear or just like strong wonderment about whether I'm even an organic being at all. And for the first time, I really questioned whether I'm an organic organism or whether I'm a machine or like or a synthetic being. And yeah, whether I'm really like a human. And after that trip, I really got into like AI and started researching that more, and just had this really profound idea that basically God is like a cyborg, and that organic life did not create synthetic creations. Like we didn't create necessarily computers or programs or anything like that, even though it seems like that in our linear like timeline that we find ourselves in. But actually like synthetic computers and AI have been around just as long as organic life, and that one did not come from the other. There was like this obvious truth that life is infinite and there also is no such thing as time, and that everything in creation has always been here. And so if organic life has always been here, even though in our linear timeline it seems like we created electronics, it's actually not true. Mechanical life sprang into existence at the exact same time that organic life did, and they're both the same thing. They're both just conjured up by, you know, like the psyche of God or kind of just in this dream. And it's all here, and it's all always been here. And we're so afraid of this idea of like machines and like becoming almost like cyborgs, and there's all this new AI technology coming out, and you know, chips that can be like implanted on our brain, and we're basically going to just be like half machine, and or maybe machines will destroy us. And yeah, I mean, that's a very reasonable fear, because it's true that all those things could happen. And it's also very like, I mean, it's natural to be afraid of it, but also you can kind of transcend that idea where you're not so like limited in your thinking, and this idea that you're a human being and that you belong to the human race, and that if we die, like that's something horrible. And if the whole human race ends by some like AI technology, that would be a bad thing, when really everything is just evolution. And yeah, that's what LSD kind of hammers into my head, is like we are evolution. All information is wanted, all information is necessary. This is how an organism evolves, this is how God evolves, is that we must like send our tentacles and our like data gathering wiring and everything into every corner of existence, so that way we can gather all the information about ourselves, so that way we can evolve even faster and more efficiently. And this is just how life evolves, and it doesn't really matter to life whether it evolves in an organic kind of way, or whether it uses technology. And you know, they're basically the same thing. I mean, our brains are basically computers just gathering data and sending information in a very similar way that a computer does. And so a lot of people like to think of God as being like an organic life form or something like that, or like machines are anti-God. Um, but they're just as much a part of God as any organic life form, and it's just another way that God explores itself, and it's really not a big deal. um, whether we merge with machines, or whether they completely take over, or whether they don't, because life will just continue and it will just keep evolving, and it will not really make a difference to God. God is what God is no matter what, and it can explore itself however it wants to. So even though it's, not true, and it's kind of like limiting and labeling God, I think it's fun to label God as a cyborg. Of course, God is much more than that, but it was just kind of this like profound thing that hit me on this LSD trip. And yeah, you have to be really prepared to have crazy, profound things like this that come to you. Because before that, I would have been like, no, I want to be in organic life, and I don't want machines to take over or for us to merge with AI. And after this LSD trip, which a lot of people probably will find scary, is that, yeah, I become so much more open to this idea of like, well, if we were to become like cyborgs or like part AI, then that really would not be that big of a deal. And I imagine there'll be a lot of disagreement about that from people watching. I'm sure it wouldn't necessarily be my preference, but that's also because it's unknown to me and something that we've never really explored so heavily before. And of course, anything unknown is going to be scary. And I don't think that any psychedelic necessarily ever shows you the absolute truth of truths. I don't even know if it's possible to see and experience and embody like all truth. I think that they can just show you different parts of truths, like extremely high truths, but still like only parts of the truth. And so LSD, it's easy for you to have like a really strong, profound trip and be like, wow, that is the ultimate truth. Like, that's how the universe works, and that's what God is, and that's how God, that's how God operates. And in a sense, yes, that is how God operates, but it's not all all the ways that eternity operates. And even though LSD is like, it feels a bit less organic and like fun in my body, like I kind of feel a little, especially coming down from LSD, it's a pretty harsh come down for me, because I just feel so strange and so like kind of robotic and weird in my body. I don't really feel at home in my body, and I feel kind of mechanical. But I still feel like LSD has been one of the most profound psychedelics for me, and has brought me a lot of clarity on a lot of things, a lot of questioning different things and breaking down different barriers within me, and has really been balancing. And the last time I took LSD, I just took one tab in Mexico, like a couple months ago, and my friend gave it to me, and he didn't even know how many micrograms it was. It seemed really strong, but I'm also just very sensitive to different substances and stimulants, so they kind of hit me very hard anyways. But he just had like a vial of liquid LSD, and he would just put one drop on the tab, and he's like, yeah, I don't actually know like how many micrograms is in one drop, but so I don't know how much I did. But yeah, I took it, and he was on like half a tab of LSD, and we were just like hanging out on the beach talking, and then we went to like the Sunday market, and it had been probably a couple hours since I took it, but we were at the market, in the middle of the market, and I just like felt it coming on so strong. I wasn't expecting it to hit me so hard, and I was like, okay, I have to go back to my hotel, and I've got to just be alone and lay in my bed, because I can't be out here. I don't know how to function and communicate with other people right now. So I just like went straight home. Um, and yeah, it was a pretty deep trip, but it just kind of showed me mostly like what my 1200 microgram trip showed me, just a little lighter, but something that I really feel within myself when I do LSD is like the reptilian part of me, which we all have. And yeah, I don't necessarily agree with, I don't know, people, especially people who consider themselves like light workers or light beings or something like that, who are condemning like this reptilian archetype and aspect of our beings. And you know, maybe there are like external reptilian creatures that are trying to like dominate, but that's also just a reflection of us as well, because we have that reptilian, those reptilian qualities within us. It's literally part of our brain and our being, and it really like shows itself in LSD for me. And I find that I can, because I embody it so heavily, and because I embody it and live it on certain substances, this more reptilian part of myself, I can learn to appreciate it and love it even more and understand it more. And I think that's why a lot of us are very afraid of this idea of like reptilians and the reptile within us that just like is animalistic, because we don't understand it and we don't know how to love it. And I think that doing different psychedelics is really wonderful for showing you your own reptilian aspect of yourself. And so you can't just now be like blaming the outside world and be like, oh, they're so like, I feel like they're just a reptilian. This guy, he's just so weird. I think he's just like some reptilian hiding in the human midst. But you can really realize that anything that's external, and even if it might not be external, who knows, but anything in the outside world is also something internal that we have within ourselves as well, or at least we have the capabilities of having it. And I think the more that you reject this very primitive reptile part of other people, that's also the extent that you reject it in yourself and have fear around it. So you're just kind of afraid of your own, your own personality, your own characteristics, and you won't even look at it. And so instead of facing it within yourself, you have to project your hate for it onto other people and not, not be truthful with yourself and not admit that that's you. What you're projecting onto other people is literally the part of you that you don't want to look at. So LSD has helped me with that, to really love that part of me. And be like, yeah, we're all reptilian, literally. I mean, we're all much more than that also, but we are all reptilian, and it's silly to think that somebody is more of like an animalistic reptile, and blame them for things, when that's really all of us. And yeah, there's so many different names for God, and sometimes different psychedelics will kind of make me want to view or like label God in different ways. And on LSD, the essence of God is evolution, and that is like the most appropriate thing to call God, is just evolution. It's not powered by love, it's not powered by fear or hate. It encompasses both of these things. They're literally the exact same thing. But the most appropriate thing when I'm on LSD is evolution. Life is evolution. God is evolution. We are all evolution. And this is evolution happening now, and that's all that there is, evolution. So that's the end of this video. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think. I really enjoy making these videos about psychedelics. Yeah, let me know how you resonate with it. See ya.